Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Premier. In light of the recent ABS employment figures showing South Australia's unemployment rate has risen to 8.2%, is the Premier still confident in the state budget's forecast of 1% employment growth in the 15-16 year?
The member for Morphet's called to order. Premier.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And necessarily the budget forecasts are put together in a conservative fashion. They're done having regard to experts within the agency, independently assessed. We don't interfere with those assessments. They're not government numbers. They reflect the assessments of the paid professional independent public service, and so they're incorporated into the budget papers on that basis. So they don't represent our targets or our promises or our commitments. They represent what's the assessment of what's likely to happen. We hope to do better than the assessment that's contained in the budget papers. We hope to grow more jobs than has been forecast by the Treasury officials. But we also need to be mindful of the fact that we are heading into incredibly strong headwinds. We have a manufacturing sector which is crumbling at an accelerating rate. We have of course, the closure of Holden's to consume. If we can indeed continue to grow employment, if in net terms we're growing employment, this will be a substantial achievement, remembering that we still have to grow by an extra 1% per annum just to soak up the additional growth in our workforce each year for us to even make any mileage on our unemployment rate. So this is a massive challenge for South Australia. It's a massive challenge not just for the government, it's a massive challenge for those sitting on the other side as well, because they play a role in supporting or making it more difficult for us to make the necessary changes which the South Australian economy needs to transform so that it can make this adjustment from an old economy to a new economy. And over the last period of time, Mr Speaker, really I think you can track back the transformation of the South Australian economy from a sleepy agrarian economy. You can track it all the way back to the Playford era when he sought to industrialise the South Australian economy. But those opportunities were blown away. That old economic model was blown away through the internationalisation of the South Australian economy with the bringing down of the tariff wall. Since that time, every government of every persuasion has been seeking to broaden the base of the South Australian economy, whether it's the defence sector, the mining sector, the tourism sector, the health industries sector, our food and wine sector, adding value to food and fibre. All of those initiatives are about governments of all persuasions seeking to broaden the South Australian economy. And I think we should be proud, all of us should be proud, of what we've achieved here in South Australia. It is a broad-based economy which does have the capacity for us to meet this challenge. And it's a challenge which is a particular challenge for South Australia. It's true that we haven't been assisted by the slowdown of the Australian economy generally. We haven't been assisted by the withdrawal of $500 million by the Commonwealth Government in relation to the closure of Holden's. We haven't been assisted by the uncertainty of the federal government that's been created around both the defence industry, in particular future submarines, or indeed our renewable energy sector. And of course we haven't been assisted by the $5.5 billion worth of cuts that have been put into the South Australian economy over the next 10 years. And we've been particularly affected by the collapse in commodity prices. But notwithstanding all of those challenges, I believe that this state has the capacity to change, to adjust and be prosperous and successful in the future. Just for those opposite, if they could just offer a positive idea and get on board.
I call to order the members for Mount Gambier, Unley and Adelaide and the leader. And because of repeated interjection, I warn the member for Unley for the first time, and I warn the member for Morphett for the first time. Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, sir. How can the Premier say with a straight face to this House that he believes the employment growth figure is prudent when last year's employment growth figure received multiple downgrades and proved to be wildly optimistic?
Mr Speaker, what never ceases to amaze me from the Leader of the Opposition is how utterly empty his contributions are to this massive challenge. It's as though in political terms, he is a spectator. He just simply watches. He's the Chauncey Gardner of Australian politics. He just likes to watch.
Being there.
Thankfully, the Premier is not responsible for the Leader of the Opposition. This is making an attempt at debate, and I ask that you rule it's relevant.
The Deputy Leader may be right, but for the Leader's question being so combative in its terms. And so the Premier is merely responding to the tone of the question.
Mr Speaker, I've outlined the basis on which that material is contained in the budget papers. I don't think there's very much more I can offer about that. It's not seeking to be a government target or indeed an expression of the opinion of this government about where we're likely to land in relation to employment. It's simply offered as expert advice, a best estimate in our budget papers, which is precisely what our budget papers are about. They're about trying to forecast the future, having regard to the past. If you want to know what our plan for South Australia is, it's laid out. Our economic plan is laid out in the 10 economic priorities for South Australia, and they have not been seriously challenged by anybody in this community, including the Leader of the Opposition. They represent a clear and cogent plan for the future of South Australia. There is plenty of scope for the Leader of the Opposition. There is plenty of scope for the Leader of the Opposition to make his own contribution to initiatives to advance the targets that are set out in that plan. Plenty of scope. We're hoping, Mr Speaker, we're hoping to see some more ambitious initiatives from the Leader of the Opposition than emerged in the last state election campaign, where the high watermark for new ideas seemed to be the reintroduction of car rego stickers.
You did get one thing right. Did say
Supplementary, sir.
The Premier's contribution was largely debate, but I allowed the opposition to interject on him without warning.
Thank you, sir. You're most benevolent on some occasions. Given the collapse in
Is this a separate question or a...
It can be however you wish to take it, sir. I'm in your hands,
away you go.
figuratively speaking. Given the collapse in business confidence in the latest surveys from both the National Australia Bank and Business SA, is the Premier concerned that the economic forecasts used in this year's state budget will still be achieved?
Premier.
Well, let's just have a look at the factual basis underpinning that question. The NAB Quarterly Business Survey, released on the 24th of July, said that business confidence rose in South Australia in the June quarter 2015, up 7 index points to +4. South Australia had the equal highest improvement in confidence with New South Wales in the quarter. So I think the proposition on which this question is based is simply false. And I invite the Leader of the Opposition to perhaps undertake a little more research before he comes into this House making false assertions as the basis for his question. The truth is, it depends who you ask. These surveys are conducted across a range of different business groups. Different surveys produce different results. But I don't seek to hide from the fact that there's been a massive hit to confidence associated with shocks to the South Australian economy. Of course there are. Anybody that has eyes and ears would be aware that there are challenges to the South Australian economy. What I have been heartened by is not that people's confidence hasn't been shaken, it's that people are defined in the face of that and want to actually work together to actually make the changes necessary to succeed in this state. That's what I've been heartened by. Of course people know that there are challenges Of course people know that there are challenges in the South Australian economy, but they also love this state. They want to work together to make sure it is successful and prosperous in the future, and we just simply invite those opposite to join with us in that endeavour.
I call to order the Minister for Health, the member for Newland, the Treasurer and the member for Mitchell, and I welcome to Parliament members of the Blackwood Probus Club who are guests of the member for Davenport, and I also welcome the sire of the member for Newland, Mr Neville Kenyon, who is here with Janine Giebert. The Leader.
Thank you, sir. My question is to the Premier. Does the Premier believe that the forecast growth of 5,000 mining jobs that the government released last October is on track to be achieved?
Premier.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As with all of the targets that we've set out in the 10 economic priorities, in particular the near-term targets and the targets we've set out for 3 years' time, we will be reviewing each of those targets. And in relation to the mining targets, there are assumptions that underpin each of the targets, and when the assumptions, well, I don't know how funny that is. I mean, not particularly. That's right. It's not meant to be a joke. That was just meant to be a statement of fact. Each of the targets has underpinning them a set of assumptions. If the assumptions change, like dramatic changes in commodity prices, then we may have to revisit some of the targets. Yeah, it's a pretty good excuse, actually, that if the facts change, you should change the basis upon which you make decisions on those facts. That's a fairly prudent approach in relation to sensible decision-making in government. So we will be reviewing a number of those targets. Some of them actually will be revised upwards. That's right. And when the assumptions changes, the targets ought to change. Some of the assumptions have changed favourably to the government. In some cases, we'll be revising. In some of the cases, we'll be revising upwards. Well, are you interested in listening, or would you just like to interrupt every 5 seconds? Some of the assumptions have moved favourably to us, and we will be making adjustments to make some of those targets even harder to achieve, because we believe that it's circumstances have changed which permit us to do that. So yes, I do accept that it will be difficult to achieve our targeted increase in mining jobs as a consequence of very rapid and recent changes to the way in which commodity prices have moved against us in South Australia, and we'll be making those changes public once they've been settled upon.
I call to order the members for Chafee Stewart, the Minister for Agriculture, and the member for Schubert, and I warn for the first time the members for Hartley and Newland. Leader.
My question is to the Premier. Does the Premier agree with the Minister for Employment, who told budget estimates that Labor's 2010 promise to deliver 100,000 additional jobs over 6 years was only aspirational as opposed to a commitment?
Yes, I think I said the very same thing myself in this House, and it seems unlikely that that commitment will be achieved. There was also a corresponding commitment that went alongside that commitment, which was to create 100,000 training places, which we dramatically exceeded and did it ahead of time. But it is true that the aftermath of the global financial crisis overwhelmed our capacity to achieve that objective. And that was a commitment that was made in the lead up to the 2010 election. And the reality is that the aftermath of the global financial crisis, the slowdown in the South Australian economy, and in particular the spectacular effect that it had on at least two very substantial... We should be wary about unforeseeable international events, unless you predicted the global financial crisis, in which case... Well, let's perhaps do this the longer way. Nobody believed that despite the... Nobody believed that despite the very successful and far-sighted response that Australian governments and indeed this government took in this country to responding to the global financial crisis, that we would get, in a sense, the second wave, the secondary effects which flowed through the international economy, and that is essentially what hit us post-2010. While we were very successful here in South Australia in weathering the effects of the global financial crisis when it first hit, through a combination of stimulus from the federal government and our own investing program, what obviously overwhelmed governments around the world and in particular in South Australia was the slowdown that occurred off the back of it. In particular, the massive retreat of global capital from investing in large projects, and we saw that with the Olympic Dam project. This hit South Australian harder than most, and more recently we've been hit harder than most as a consequence of a high and sustained exchange rate. So we didn't get the benefit. Well, let's. So those opposite think that decision making is made within an instant associated with a currency that sits at parity for almost 2 years. Well, here's a bit of a primer about the South Australian economy. It's a very exchange rate sensitive economy, and most commentators would acknowledge that the high and sustained Australian dollar had a massive impact on manufacturing in this country. And I must say, if the Leader of the Opposition doesn't understand the nature of the problem, how on earth would you trust him with being in charge of the solution? How on earth would you be in charge of trusting him with a solution? This, of course, is the same leader that actually was lecturing us about our infrastructure spend as being a false economy. But the people of South Australia saw through that at the last state election. They chose a government that decided to keep on building South Australia. Sit down.
Point of order.
It's clearly debate.
Yes, I uphold the point of order. And I call to order the Leader and warn for the first time the Deputy Leader, the member for Chaffey, the member for Mount Gambier, the member for Schubert, the Treasurer, the member for Adelaide and the member for Stewart, and I warned for the second and final time the members for Unley and Newland, who has been doing it all day. The Leader.
So my question is to the Premier. Given the Premier's public comments on the 22nd of June this year about the prospect of broadening the base of the goods and services tax, when did he first contemplate changes to our GST arrangements?
Premier.
Well, all of my remarks are on the public record. I made a speech to the National Press Club where I contemplated a broadening of the GST base. We published a NatSem report which looked at all the elements of broadening the base, and the only element of broadening the base that's not regressive is to broaden the base and include for the first time the GST on financial services. That would raise in the order of $3.6 billion across the nation, which would be an important contribution to the funding gap that exists between the revenue that we raise and the services that we need to spend our money on. So it certainly was canvassed publicly at that time. The second principal event that occurred was that the Premier of New South Wales made a substantial intervention in the debate and suggested that we should contemplate lifting the rate of the GST by 15%. And I met with that suggestion, the suggestion that I couldn't contemplate such a thing unless there was some attendance to those on low incomes that would be adversely affected by such a change. But I did say that we needed to have this debate. It was a valuable debate where a Conservative leader in this country has contradicted all the nonsense that we've heard from the other side of politics, that there has not actually been a cut in the federal healthcare budget. The truth is, he belled the cat on the fact there has been a massive cut in healthcare funding from the Commonwealth to the states, and he went further.
Point of order.
Given your excellent earlier ruling today that allows for interjections when debate is ensuing, is this now the time that we can interject?
The Deputy Leader is warned for the second and final time for a bogus interjection. If you want to interject, take your chances. Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the context in which I responded to Premier Baird's intervention in the debate was this very important question of him identifying that there is a gap between what we raise as a nation and what we spend in particular on healthcare services. And he went further. Not only did he say that that's caused by the cut that came from the Commonwealth, he said that the problem's even bigger than that. And he went further again to analyse the other contention that's usually put against the states and territories on healthcare spending, to show in all the international data Australia has one of the most efficient healthcare systems in the world. That's not to say that there can't be improvements, but on any measure, we have one of the most efficient healthcare systems in the world. So what that means is, even with additional efficiencies, we're not going to make up the difference between what we raise for health expenditure and what we spend on our healthcare system. That drives you in the direction of a revenue measure. And it's to the credit of a Conservative leader that he was prepared to actually be honest enough to say that, because this goes against Liberal orthodoxy. It goes against Liberal Party orthodoxy. That's why when the man said that, I was not going to allow him to be chopped off at the knees in the national debate, which always usually starts with somebody saying controversial and then they get piled on by everybody in the gotcha moment. He's made this faux pas. Let's all kick the person that raises the issue to death so that it never gets raised again. I wanted to support him and have his voice heard so that we could have this important national debate. And what it did, I'm pleased to say, is that all leaders, state and territory leaders, joined in with that spirit, and actually we had a sensible and honest debate about the challenges that are facing this nation. And it includes a revenue problem that requires something to fix it, and that is an increase in some form of taxation. I favour an increase in taxation that doesn't hit those who can least afford it the hardest.
Sir.
Supplementary
to the Treasurer. When the Treasurer said in the House on the 2nd of July 2015, and I quote, "The only people who are advocating changes to the GST are our political opponents, not us," had the Premier raised with him the prospects of broadening the GST?
Mr Speaker, the Premier and I, and indeed his entire Cabinet, are at one with him. And I know it's a unique concept for members opposite, the concept of unity and solidarity. But, Mr Speaker, I think it's fair to say we are exceptionally proud of the work our Premier is doing on the national stage, punching above our weight, arguing for the reforms that our Federation needs. And I think, Mr Speaker, the Australian Financial Review put it best today.
Oh, really? What did they say?
A familiar quip when landing in Adelaide from the eastern states may be becoming a thing of the past. Ladies and gentlemen, the pilot says, "Wind back your watches 30 minutes. Says the flight attendant to the response, and of course your mind back 20 years. But Jay Weatherill has favoured moving South Australia time to eastern states time as he pushes forward on another front left vacant for many years. With a Royal Commission...
Well, the Minister is digressing from the substance of the question. The time zones, really, sir.
Yes. On the face of it, the member for Unley would appear to be correct. I'm waiting for the Treasurer to join up his remarks to be germane to the question.
Yes, sir. With a Royal Commission destined to favour embracing the nuclear industry and Adelaide seeking to be the testing bed for driverless cars, Weatherill has not been quiet on the decision-making front. It does, however, make you wonder about the state Liberals. Perhaps singularly the most unsuccessful Liberal or Labor Party around the country in the last 40 years.
Is the point of order that this is debate?
Yes, sir.
I uphold the point of order.
Getting to GST, the article says the Liberals have said no to privatisation, no to the closure of obsolete hospitals,
I'll anticipate the member for Unley's point of order and ask the Treasurer to move on from the subject of the Parliamentary Liberal Party and address the question.
Yes, sir. The party, the cabinet, the caucus are at one with the Premier, sir. And we are at one with the Premier because Mike Baird has dared to raise difficult questions. And the Premier, sir, did the right thing. He did the right thing, Mr. Speaker. What he did was he wouldn't allow another state Premier who raised very, very difficult questions about a difficult situation. There are real cuts being made to health and education by the Commonwealth. How do we deal with these cuts? How do we structure our finances to deal with the needs that South Australians and those living across the Federation require to fund an effective hospital and education system? Now, Mr. Speaker, the truth is this, is that our Premier is prepared to tackle difficult questions, and we support him in that endeavour. And so the only person not consulted about the most successful Liberal leader in the country, the only person Mike Baird didn't consult was the most unsuccessful Liberal leader in the country, the Leader of the Opposition.
It's defying your ruling, and there are steps you're...
I agree the Treasurer is defying my ruling, so I warn him for the second and final time, as I also do the members for Stewart and Mount Gambier. Member for Chafee.
Thank you, sir. My question is to the Minister for Investment and Trade. Minister, given that China is South Australia's largest trading partner, does the Minister support a motion passed at the 2015 Labor National Conference to oppose the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement?
Well,
Minister.
The government is doing more than any government in recent decades to promote trade with China. We have been very supportive of efforts by the current federal government to promote trade with Japan, South Korea and China, including support for free trade agreements. However, you have to wait and see how these free trade agreements are going to unfold. I'm optimistic that they will be very, very good for the state because they have already delivered billions of dollars worth of benefits to the state. So we've made it very clear we support any measure which promotes further trading engagement with China. China is our biggest trading partner, and we look forward to seeing further growth in our trade outcomes with China.
The member for Chafee.
Given that the Treasurer has said that we are at one, Premier, can you advise whether you supported the motion and how many of South Australia's Labor MPs supported the motion?
Well, I'm not sure that the Premier, any minister, is responsible for any member other than himself or herself supporting a motion. Is the Minister for Health going to answer?
The Premier, nor is any minister responsible for the way he or she votes at an ALP event, ALP function. Not responsible to the House.
Point of order, Member for Unley.
It is very relevant how Cabinet members vote at ALP conference because ALP members of Parliament are bound by decisions of the conference.
The member for Unley will be seated. I take the view that it's part of a minister's public conduct and therefore the minister is responsible for his utterances and vote or her utterances and vote, but not responsible for any other minister or member. So is the question of the member for Chafee directed to the Premier?
Yes, it is, sir.
All right, Premier.
Speaker, I participated in the first 2 days of the ALP National Conference and made a contribution in relation to a very important issue for South Australia, which is the question of the Future Submarines project, and promoted. Well, I wasn't at the National Conference. No, I had other commitments. So I was.
Premier, will you be seated? If the Deputy Leader moves her lips out of order again in the next 30 minutes, she'll be ejected under the standing order. Premier.
I was asked a question directly about my contribution to the debate, and I was not at National Conference for the purposes of that debate. My contributions were made. My contributions were made at the debate concerning the Future Submarines project, where I advocated for a 30-year continuous shipbuilding program and a 30-year continuous submarine building program for the Labor Party should they form a government. And it's my intention, whoever happens to form a government and whoever is seeking to form a government in the lead up to the next election, to advocate strongly for both of those propositions in the lead up to the election. I'll also be powerfully advocating, whatever the position of Federal Labor or Federal Liberal Party is, for a strong position in relation to local jobs. Well, that's what I'm talking about. I will advocate strongly for projects that are built here in South Australia to have a workforce which is working on those projects to be an Australian workforce. That will be my position. I'll be strongly advocating for that. State-based. There are ample state. Let me tell you, there are ample state safeguards to ensure that South Australian workforce and South Australian standards are applied to any project that's built here in South Australia. So whatever the Commonwealth Government's ambitions are, whatever the Federal Labor Party might have about this, my position in South Australia is that we will use state-based regulatory processes to ensure that we maintain standards. That includes, of course I do, but that includes protecting. We've been here with a ministerial statement supporting the free trade agreement. What we don't support is the bringing in of overseas labour into South Australia to work on projects. We're bringing in overseas labour to work on projects here in South Australia in contradiction of the standards and occupational licensing arrangements which are governed by the state and territory governments. That's something we will insist on, and we will not. There will be no federal regulation or federal strictures that will prevent us from doing anything other than insisting on those obligations. I support the free trade agreement because it is positive for South Australia and is consistent with the approach that we have taken in relation to internationalising the South Australian economy, but it won't be about compromising labour standards or jobs for South Australians here on South Australian projects.
I'd like to congratulate the member for Schubert on his excellent interjection, which probably wasn't captured by Hansard, and I call the member for Schubert.
My question is to the Minister for Tourism. Given that during estimates last week the Minister said, "I'm quite prepared to give you a copy of that receipt in relation to cost of accommodation in Edinburgh last year," is the Minister now in a position to provide a copy of that receipt?
Point of order.
Standing Order number 97, the question is disorderly.
The question is disorderly because
the member for Schubert proposes facts and argument prior to getting the leave of the House.
Well, I think he had an initial clause saying "given that." Yeah. Well, I think we'll treat. He could have sought leave for it, but he's put it as the initial clause of the explanation as the initial clause of what I think is a one-sentence question. So I'll allow it, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. I gave that answer last week. It's the same answer this week. I'm happy for them, for the opposition to have that receipt, and I think they might already have it from an FOI from before. I don't know, but happy for them to have the receipt.
Supplementary.
Can I ask the Minister then when that receipt will be disclosed, and also why that information wasn't proactively disclosed on the website as opposed to proactive disclosure DPC circular, as is the normal practice?
Minister.
Yeah, thank you again, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for the question. That's incorrect, that statement, to say that it wasn't publicly disclosed. Everything that we spend in our office is put up as soon as possible, usually at the end of the month where the expenditure has taken place, and the total cost of that trip was put up as part of the public disclosure that we do each month. So once again, they're coming from a false assumption and trying to say something that didn't happen.
Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Planning and Urban Development. When did the Urban Renewal Authority Board meet to recommend that no dividend for the 14-15 year be paid to government? And when did the Minister write to the Treasurer to seek a release of that payment?
Deputy Premier.
Yes, thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for a question. As to the date of the first of those matters, I am not entirely sure, and I'll have to check that matter up. As to the second of those matters, I think it was a few days ago, and the matter is now a matter that is the subject of consideration.
Deputy Leader, supplementary.
May I inquire as to whether the Minister will provide that information to the House?
Deputy Premier.
Well, yes, as I said, I will endeavour to find out for the House when the board meeting that is referred to occurred, and I'll get back. Yeah. Yeah, as I said, that's only a day or so ago. It's not very long. But the board meeting, I don't know where. I don't have the vaguest idea, other than it was in the last 6, 8 weeks or whatever it was. I don't know where it was, so I'm not even going to hazard a guess at that.
Supplementary. Is the Attorney able to confirm as Minister whether he forwarded that letter before or after he gave evidence to Estimates Committee A?
I believe that it would have been after.
Member for Little Para.
Thank you, sir. My question is to the Deputy Premier. Deputy Premier, what is Renew Adelaide doing to promote vibrancy in the city?
We didn't know that the government was responsible for Gemütlichkeit in the entertainment precinct, but Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and it's lovely to know that there is a linguist in the chair. And for those of you, he's talking about hospitality, for those of you who didn't pick up on what he said. But for you too, Hansard, and it's got an umlaut over the U. In any event, vibrancy in the city. Vibrancy in the city. Well, Renew Adelaide seeks to connect creative entrepreneurs who are mostly made up of our talented young South Australians with vacant commercial properties through the use of 30-day rent rolling licences. This approach is used as a vehicle to build capacity of creative entrepreneurs and to promote innovation. Renew Adelaide is a not-for-profit organisation with support from the state government through Renewal SA and the Adelaide City Council. And can I add at this point also the fantastic work being done by the case management team at Renewal SA, and before the present time that same team working out of Planning SA. They've done an extraordinary amount of great work in case management and assisting particularly young entrepreneurs to get into the space where they can actually get a business going, especially some of the small venues in the city. But nevertheless, despite Renew Adelaide's admirable and welcome aims, which in my opinion the city needs a great deal more of, it's come to my attention that recently some members of the Adelaide City Council prefer to take a very narrow view indeed, and recently have described the work, as I understand it, of this group as, quote, cancer, unquote, and, quote, flesh-eating bacteria, quote, unquote. Now, recently, for example, Renew Adelaide added vibrancy to Regent Arcade through connecting the Genos Group, owners of the arcade, with young entrepreneurs. And there have been a number of businesses that have been connected in this way with opportunities for accommodation. Such opportunities afforded to young entrepreneurs add life to what would otherwise be vacant tenancies in one of our well-known shopping arcades. It also provides young entrepreneurs a relatively low-risk environment for them to trial their creative and innovative businesses that opens the potential for such enterprises to grow and mature. The model of offering 30-day rent-free rolling licences to these innovative businesses also benefits the owners of such vacant tenancies by assisting them with having an attractive, active property to market to prospective longer-term commercial tenants. Renew Adelaide continues to provide vibrancy in other parts of the city, such as Topham Mall and indeed Port Adelaide. The challenge which they are aware of is, of course, how to ensure that such great work by Renew Adelaide can be more sustainable and does in fact continue, despite unhelpful comments by some members of the City Council. And can I say again that they have worked very well with the case management team and group within Renewal SA, and this same group previously resided in planning, and the work that they have done in terms of providing case management assistance for people wishing to establish businesses has been extremely helpful, and some of the flourishing small venues seen in our city would not have been possible without their great work.
The member for Ghana.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Tourism. Minister, what assistance is the state government providing to help attract tourists to regional events and festivals?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Ghana for the question and acknowledge his interest in events in his part of the world, and also...
Deputy Leader will withdraw under the standing order for the remainder of question time. Minister.
Yeah, thanks again, Mr Speaker. Once again, I thank the member for Ghana for the question and acknowledge his strong interest in events in his part of the world down there and along the coastline of the metropolitan part of the Fleurieu Peninsula, and in particular the Beachside Food and Wine Festival at Christie's Beach, which the government is very proud and happy to support. Mr Speaker, the state government knows the importance of attracting tourists to regional communities, and events are a huge driving force for tourists in their decision-making and have long played an important role in our state's tourism industry. Today I'm pleased to announce South Australian events have been given a major financial boost through a program designed to drive more visitors to the state's regions. A total of 30 events and festivals from across South Australia have received a share of $300,000 as recipients of funding through the state government's 2015-16 Regional Events and Festivals program. Events help celebrate the vibrancy and creativity of South Australia and are significant to the sense of pride in our state. As the demand for Adelaide and South Australia as tourism destinations grow, we need to ensure we're driving this demand and continuing to move forward with the foundations we've already laid. Events and festivals inject millions of dollars into local economies, and on the larger scale, I guess we just look back at last week's match with Liverpool here, 10,000 visitors from interstate and overseas, injecting about $10 million into our economy. And it's a reason we've injected a further $35 million into tourism in our recent state budget. And we want to continue to spend more money on attracting festivals and events, and also to market South Australia interstate and of course internationally. The Regional Events and Festivals program assists events which generate a significant increase to visitors to South Australia. Support's provided for marketing activities to increase each event's profile and help generate an increase in tourism activity. The program includes the Community Events Development Fund, which provides grants of up to $5,000 to smaller community-based events which have the potential to grow into a larger regional tourism event. And I know, looking at some of the recipients from previous years, groups have done a tremendous job. I remember the Rose Festival up at Renmark. What they used the money for last year was to do some advertising across the border in Victoria, to bring people across the border into our state and spend money into our economy. So a little bit of money goes a long way sometimes with these events, and really helps the events and those, often the volunteers who run those events, to get a foothold in and to grow visitation. The events and festivals to receive funding in this financial year are the 18-hour Melrose mountain bike event up in the Flinders Ranges, so that's terrific. Yeah, the Kangaroo Island Marathon. Kangaroo Island's done pretty well, the Lower Lakes Stockman's Challenge on the Fleurieu Peninsula. So anyone wants to get down there and see a bit of whip work and a bit of bareback riding and stuff like that, I'm sure Gunny's probably going to be down there. That'll be terrific. The Beta Birdwood, of course, you know, the metropolitan area up into the Adelaide Hills. The Ceduna Oyster Fest, it's a terrific event, usually held in the end of September each year. The Coonawarra Cabernet celebrations on the Limestone Coast, and I know the member for Mount Gambier dropped in, and we had a Cab Sav down there during last year's celebrations. The Renmark Rose Fest, yeah. No, it was a Cab Sav. The Renmark Rose Festival is up again for some more money, so the member for Chaffey will be happy with that. The Gorgeous Festival down at McLaren Vale. The Bay Sheffield, of course, a fantastic event, and last year we had that young Tasmanian athlete participate in that, so that drew a lot of attention as well. So Crush in the Adelaide Hills, Tunarama Festival over in Port Lincoln, the Glenelg Triathlon, Kangaroo Island Cup Carnival, the Queen of the Desert up in the Flinders Ranges in Outback again, the Blenheim Fest in the Clare Valley, the Cadell Harvest Festival in the Riverland. Member for Stewart, big fan of the Cadell community and a strong advocate for them, of course. Beachside Food and Wine Festival at Christie's Beach, we've announced. York Peninsula's Saltwater Classic, well done, the member for Gorda. The South Australian Masters Games in the Murray River, Lakes and Coorong area. Float Fest on the Murray River, Lakes and Coorong again. The Great Breakaways Marathon in the Flinders Ranges and Outback. Kangaroo Island Festival, the Clare Valley Gourmet Festival, Penola Coonawarra Arts, the Melrose Fat Tyre Festival, Port Augusta Cup Day, Adelaide Beer and Barbecue Festival, which was a huge success just a few weeks ago, Winter Reds Festival in the Adelaide Hills, and the South Australian Living Arts Festival. That's a statewide one, so everyone's a winner on that one. Feel like Oprah Winfrey, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car, and the Barossa Gourmet Weekend. So very good news there for the member for Schubert.
Member for Torrens.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister for the Arts. What influenced the attendance numbers at the Art Gallery in the last financial year?
Minister for the Arts.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and thank the member for Torrens for her question. I'm pleased to inform the House that attendances at the Art Gallery of South Australia have increased significantly this year. Staggering 779,670 visitors attended our state's premier gallery in the 2014-15 financial year, including our treasurer. This is the highest attendance in the gallery's history and is a remarkable 12% increase on the previous year. The significant increase was underpinned by strong attendance from children and their families at free public programs that support them, as well as the newly introduced First Fridays, which allow the gallery to stay up late on the first Friday of each month. Supported by Santos, First Fridays are proving successful in drawing an after-work crowd for music, drinks and special talks and tours. The START program, supported by the Balnaves Foundation, runs on the first Sunday of the month and aims to introduce children to the art gallery, foster a love of the collection. Similarly, the studio is a free hands-on activity supported by the James and Diana Ramsey Foundation. Mr Speaker, school visits also rose last financial year to almost 35,000, taking the total number of attendances at child-friendly programs to 77,500. Another increase in attendance came from tourism, with 26% of the 60,000 visitors to fashion icons' masterpieces from the collection of the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, Paris, hailing from outside South Australia. These notable achievements by one of our most important cultural institutions confirms the public appetite for accessible and innovative arts. Of course, none of these great results would have been possible without the hard work and dedication of our wonderful director, Nitz Miskovich, who, since taking the reins in 2010, has seen our gallery transform from a cultural asset to an economic necessity, backed by a strong board now chaired by Tracy Whiting and a generous foundation. I'd like to acknowledge all the staff, volunteers and supporters of the gallery. It's because of their enthusiasm, generous support, and we continue to reinvigorate the artistic experience and make it accessible to more and more members of the community. Finally, Mr Speaker, the Art Gallery's current exhibition, Treasure Ships Art in the Age of Spices, is on display until the 30th of August. It's a collection of artworks and pieces that reflect the cultural interaction between Europe and Asia from the 16th to the 19th centuries. Encourage all members to get along and see this stunning exhibition. Support our fantastic cultural institution.
The member for Colton.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Emergency Services. What natural disaster resilience program grants will be made available to South Australians to assist in protecting their communities from natural disasters?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question and his interest in keeping our community safe. Mr Speaker, the National Partnership Agreement for Natural Disaster Resilience, which was signed by the Premier and the Prime Minister in early 2014, is an important funding source enabling South Australia to progress the National Strategy for Disaster Resilience. This strategy helps to reduce the impact of emergencies, develop appropriate emergency management capability and capacity, and provide support to volunteers. Natural disasters are a fact of life in Australia. You only have to look at 7 months ago, a devastating Samson Flat bushfire. Natural disasters have an enormous impact on our economy and can cripple businesses and communities. However, communities across South Australia are stepping up efforts to manage natural disaster risks. Today, the Commonwealth Minister for Justice, the Honourable Michael Keenan, and I have announced more than $5.5 million of projects to assist communities across South Australia to build resilience to natural disasters. These projects, led by state agencies, local councils, non-government organisations and volunteer organisations, are all designed to help communities to be better prepared and respond to natural disasters. The funding, which is provided by the federal and state governments, will deliver a variety of projects to support the community in their efforts. Funding will go to 33 projects, including $40,000 to directly support the social recovery of Samson Flat and surrounding communities impacted by St Kilda bushfires in January 2015. $88,000 will go to District Council Mallala for the Parham Foreshore Levee Upgrades Project and the Middle Beach Community Emergency Plan. $74,000 will go to Australian Red Cross to build resilience in culturally and linguistically diverse communities.
Unfortunately, the state government doesn't control the federal government, and all of this information is in a release dated 29th of July, which is on the Honourable Michael Keenan's website, detailing the costs and the projects that that money will go to.
Come on. Well, that it is on the website of a minister of another jurisdiction, albeit publicly available, is to apply the rule, in my view, too rigorously. So, if the member for Schubert can establish that the minister is reading one of his own news releases, I'll pull him up.
It says joint media release on here.
Can the minister assure me that nothing he is advising the House has been issued as a news release in his name?
No, it hasn't. I can assure you. Sorry, I can assure you.
You can assure me.
Yeah.
Minister.
Thank you. 11,300. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Minister.
Minister.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, $11,300 for the Horse Federation of South Australia to establish a mobile large animal rescue capability and conduct associated village rescue. And $315,000. Sorry. Given, Mr. Speaker, given
Minister.
I continue.
Is the minister telling us something we don't already know?
Your question, Mr. Speaker, was Is this a result of a press release I've put out myself in this state? The answer is no. And the information, Mr. Speaker, the information was clearly provided. The information.
No, I'm not taking a point of order. I'm listening to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The information obviously was provided by my office, my agencies, to the federal minister because it's a joint activity. So I think it's quite appropriate that we announce it. So, Mr. Speaker, $315,000 for the Country Fire Service for bushfire management planning, $200,000 for the SES for several projects including extreme weather, heatwave mitigation, and $63,000 for the Surf Lifesaving SA. Mr. Speaker, I congratulate all recipients.
This can be found at safecom.sa.gov.au, which is a state government website.
Is the minister finished? Member for Adelaide.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister for Health. Given the government's announcement to move the Women's and Children's Hospital in approximately 10 years, what will the government do to increase parking around the hospital to ensure the safety and access of staff and families using the hospital?
Minister. Very, very happy to take this question. I have to say the problems that we have had with parking around the Women's and Children's Hospital are entirely the result of parking restrictions that have been imposed for the last number of years by the Adelaide City Council. And I find it somewhat galling to see Councillor Anne Moran all pompous protecting certain residents in the suburbs of North Adelaide from being inconvenienced by hard-working nurses and family wanting to visit sick children and getting all pompous about it as if this was somehow the result of some failing on the state government, when she knows full well it's her NIMBYism, which is her whole approach to public life, that has resulted in this problem. Now, we have done a number of things to try and reduce the inconvenience, particularly to our nursing staff after hours, with making sure that if they're having to walk to a car, that they are given that they're escorted by security and that procedures are made to put in place to try and reduce the inconvenience. But the Anne Moran and the Adelaide City Council cannot get off the hook on this one, because there is no doubt that all the problems that we've had with parking around the Women's and Children's Council have been entirely imposed by the Adelaide City Council. And the Adelaide City Council, which is willing to provide exemptions for some particular areas, for various sporting clubs and so on, have been willing to provide parking exemptions, and yet when it comes to the families of sick children, the Adelaide City Council would rather stand up for their mates in North Adelaide, and Councillor Moran looking after her constituency in North Adelaide and not worrying about, and would always put those people ahead of the families of sick children. I find it particularly galling, but we'll do everything we can. We will do everything that we can to reduce as much as we can
for the second and final time.
Inconvenience to the relatives of sick children and to our hard-working nursing staff who work there. No, we won't be investing in increasing the size of the car park there, because it wouldn't make sense to, because our intention is to move the Women's and Children's Hospital in around a 10-year time frame. It would simply be not a good use of taxpayers' money to invest in expanding that car park, when in the medium term our objective is to, if the Leader of the Opposition took a greater interest in the families of sick children rather than siding with the Adelaide City Council, and Councillor Moran.
The Minister will be seated. The member for Unley.
I'll take you to 127, making personal reflections and also imputing improper
Yes,
motives.
that may be so. That may be so, but the Leader was shouting at the top of his voice at the Minister, which, louder than that, says the Minister was responding to the interjection. He shouldn't do that, but I'm not going to call him out of order because he responded to a hollered interjection.
Point of order, sir. The Minister said that the the Leader of Opposition put the interests of others before that of children, and that's imputing improper motives. I ask it to be withdrawn.
The member for Unley has raised his second point of order as bogus, and he will leave the House under the sessional order for the next hour. The Minister.
Mr Speaker, of course we won't be investing in expanding the car park there, simply because our long-term or medium-term ambition is to move the Wymondham Children's Hospital, and I've no doubt that we'll make sure that when we do that, we'll ensure that there is plenty of parking space for both staff at the children and especially for the families of sick children who are seeking to visit their patients in the Wymondham Kids.